Happy New Year, Internets. This is Zero Bleek with the Zero Bandwidth Podcast, Episode 3. Um, uh, 2025 is among us. Yeah, 2025 is upon us, which means a lot to look forward to in the new year. New games. We've already gotten one new console with the PlayStation 5 Pro. But there's a lot of speculation about some upcoming hardware releases, particularly from Nintendo. And then, of course, there's a lot of speculation about future consoles, which are expected to debut sometime in 2027, 2028, if someone doesn't jump the gun. Um, uh, just to start, I was trying to plan an episode, what to talk about. And the first thing that came to mind since the last podcast was definitely the PlayStation's 30th anniversary. I mean, talked about it on previous podcasts. That date came and went. Um, December 4th, 1994, I believe, was the day. Actually, let me double check that. December 3rd. Okay, had the wrong date. That's the original Japanese release for the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, which you see here on the screen. I mean, it was a revolutionary device, right? Uh, Consoles prior to this, the NES, the SNES, the Sega Genesis, most consoles were console based. There may have been a few players that stepped into the CD-ROM realm early on, but those consoles were super expensive. There wasn't a whole lot of hardware support. CD technology back then was kind of on the expensive side, especially for 1994. They were starting to come into the hands of average folk. Um, on the basic audio CD player side, but something that played like video encoded technology, pretty much unheard of unless you were like rich or you had some kind of connection, um, or you just you made money. But the average person didn't have access to that kind of technology. So when we got a glimpse of that running on supported hardware, I mean it was a game changer. Like the thing sounded advanced. When you hit that power button and it whirled up. Um, the graphics, again, for its time, never seen before up until that point. I mean, the Sega Saturn was the direct competitor to this console, and later the N64. But prior to that, no one had ever seen graphics quite like the PlayStation outside of an arcade. Um, and again, for its time, it's super advanced. I mean, it looks like, uh, everything looks like Picasso paintings now. Um, but for 1994, I mean, it was awesome. So again, 30th anniversary, Japanese release. Um, I guess this year, September 9th would be the North American 30th anniversary. Not sure if they'll do anything for that, but as you already know, they've done 30th anniversary consoles, which in my opinion they should have released way more before the Christmas holiday. If there was a concern about costs or whatever the case may be, that would not have been a problem. I think Sony's failing was not servicing the fans enough. Yeah, there were limited, batches of the 30th anniversary consoles and other products released, but they all went to the scalpers, right? For the most part, now they're showing up on websites for $3,000 and $4,000. It just created a condition where it's just like regular folk just it wasn't getting in the hands of fans, And it's just like, again, like just like sneakers, like to the highest bidder. So I think that was a missed opportunity for Sony. Um, and E3 1995 was when the product was announced. There's that famous video of Steve Race announcing the price, and just to set the stage for this time, I think at this point Sega had announced the Saturn, surprise released it into stores that summer. Um, and it was expensive. It was like $400 or $500 if I'm remembering that correctly. So when E3 rolled around and they had announced the price, $299. I mean that kind of sealed Sega's fate at that point. And let me just play this clip. And I can't take credit for this clip or the original source of this footage, but I'm playing it on this guy Soldier MWS on YouTube. But just take a listen really quickly.
Steelways, join me for a brief presentation.
And you see that's how like the price of this thing was announced. Like it was just such like a mic drop moment, right? That might have been like one of the first mic drop moments caught on video, I guess. Probably not, but from gaming history's perspective, I mean, like that was a big deal, especially going into the next gen. Sega had already established that the next gen was going to be expensive with the the $400 price point, and then Sony came in with this $299 price point, and just like from there, it was like set in stone that generation was all PlayStations. The marketing campaign around it was, super epic, super aggressive. They courted teens and young adults, whereas, I mean, Sega was kind of chasing the same people, and they kind of started that push with the Genesis, with a more aggressive push to teens, as opposed to Nintendo's approach, which is like a console as a toy, and kept it kind of like a children's toy for the most part. Yeah, so again, just setting the stage. Um, you know, uh, Nintendo Nintendo was geared more towards kids. PlayStation took a very aggressive stance, courting teens and young adults, early mid 20s, and it worked for them. Um, and what you see on the screen here is PlayStation's history page, which I guess goes through all the consoles that they've released over the last 30 years. Um, see what this one does. Evolution of the PlayStation. I don't know if I want to watch that video now. We can always come back to that. Um, but just going back to since the launch, 102 consoles. For the longest time, I think it was like the second running, uh, the second place most sold console next to PlayStation 1. And I think 3DS and Switch, I think, might have surpassed it at this point. Um, PlayStation 2, I think, is still in the lead with 150 million units sold. But again, Switch may change that. Um, I mean, you guys already know countless releases, the countless franchises that are still around with us to this day. Um, Many classic revolutionary moments that pushed into the 3D space. A lot of it was like really, really super experimental. So you got all these like weird games, primarily coming out of Japan, but things slowly started tilting towards the American and European markets. So you started seeing like a lot of interesting stuff coming online. Um, Console specs at that time, like again, like 16 million colors was like something that was like on the side of the box. 360 polygons on screen being processed through the I think it was like a 33 megahertz processor or something like that. Like real like amazing technology for its day. But actually, let's pull up the PlayStation specs. So yeah, let's go to the wiki page, You can see, where is it? Development, launch, hardware. Yep, main processor was a uh, RISC chip by LSI Logic. The clock speed of 33.8 megahertz. 32-bit CPU, and 2 megabytes of main RAM, and an additional 1 megabyte of video RAM. So you match it up to, technology of today. I mean, it's just there's no comparison, right? But this was super advanced for its time. And again, 60 million colors, man. You can't beat that. And then mainstream the games on CD-ROM. It was a cheaper alternative to cartridges, and also allowed for games to be bigger. I think CDs held 650 megabytes, and you could, as opposed to expensive cartridge chipsets. I don't know what the average cartridge memory capacity was, but the higher the capacity, the more expensive. So if you wanted to do something really, really wildly ambitious, it'd be an expensive game. I just remember like Neo Geo. They were like direct arcade boards put in console form, and the cartridges were huge, but they were also expensive. I remember just seeing games that were like just as expensive as like buying a brand new console, like $200 and $300. Whereas the CD format, it was easier to press. There were no moving parts, but they had to introduce like the memory card, which would save all your game progress on it. And I remember those being like a premium, like that was like a precious commodity. All your game saves and also being transportable to your friend's house. You didn't have to take the whole cartridge over there or the whole console. You just took your memory card, slapped it into your friend's console, and you guys would just like play together whatever games you guys wanted to couch co-op. Marketing too, like I just remember the marketing campaign around this was just so like revolutionary and aggressive, and like it explains why the brand is as strong as it is today, because of the foundation that this console laid down for what was to come later. And this was also pre HD, right? So everybody had these like fat back televisions, big back televisions, CRT monitors, Sony Trinitrons, if you were like a Sony file like myself. And what was it, 480p was probably like the most resolution we saw at the time, and that 4:3 aspect ratio, very different from how it is today. Original console, and then there's the PS1, which they downsized shortly after the PlayStation 2 was released, and this is the PlayStation Classic, which came out maybe a couple of years ago. I'm seeing 2018 here, which was like a small, small console with like some preloaded games on it, and this is one of the accessories released for the PlayStation 1. I never got this, but I always wanted to. I should have gotten it at the time, especially like when the console was going out the door and these things were like super cheap, and you could have plucked one off the shelf for probably like $50 total. Should have done that. Original console, no analog sticks. This was just such a weird device when it was first shown. It was just like, what? No letter buttons. What is the hell is all these letters mean? The X, circle. We all call it X, but it's cross. That's the proper designation for that button. And again, it was just weird. The separated D-pad, also an interesting choice. I just remember playing Street Fighter Alpha and getting like so many blisters on my hands, trying to beat my cousin and my brother at Street Fighter Alpha. And then it slowly evolved. I actually had all of these controllers, right? Like this one came out, no rumble. Um, I just remember that was the differentiation between the concave and the raised analog sticks. This one, no rumble. This one rumble, which was affectionately named the DualShock after. And I think I got this when Metal Gear Solid was announced. But I did have this one. I don't know where it is now. And I bought this. I bought these like day one. That was like my mo. Like I just had to have the latest and greatest all the time. But yeah, when this one was released, the original DualShock, I think it was Metal Gear, was like the first game that kind of took advantage of those features for me and in my experience. And it was great. Subsequent releases and again all the accessories, man, there were so many. And I had most of them. I didn't have the joystick, even though it was on my list, but I did have the multi-tap. I didn't see a need for this, the Pocket Station, so I never got that. I did have the PlayStation mouse, and of course, like tons of memory cards, like all over the place. Classics like Lord of Crawl. I mean, again, like come on, Ridge Racer, like it's like one of the first games. Tekken, of course. I don't know, hundreds of hours. Wipeout, definitely. I mean, again, these are all like the foundational franchises that sprung out of that era. Resident Evil, come on, it's a classic. I just remember playing this, seeing this for the first time over at my cousin's house. We were all like packed into the basement. It's mad dark, surround sound on a big screen TV. I think it's probably one of the first like official games I played on PlayStation. And it was scary as shit. Crash Bandicoot, of course. It's funny, dude is on Microsoft now, but it started off on PlayStation. I mean, Crash Bandicoot was on every platform at this point. When they were owned by Activision, but now everything is folded under the umbrella of Microsoft. So that franchise is now a Microsoft franchise. Final Fantasy, one of the greatest games ever made. I don't know how many hours. I mean, again, like the counter in the game on my save doesn't even move anymore. Like that's how many hours I put into that game. Gran Turismo, which was at the time, again, this is 1997, one of the most like visually breathtaking games. Like you really swore it was like real life. That's how realistic the cars looked. But it's all, again, like I said earlier, everything looks like a Picasso now. Metal Gear, I mean, is honorable mentions. Oddworld, Ape Escape, each revolutionary in their own respect. But I mean, this game right here was a goddamn game changer. It made games more cinematic. I think that's what this was like the goal for a lot of developers in like making games more like the movies. Because I remember, for the longest time, that industry was chasing like movie theater type engagement, and movies were, I don't know, like a $13-14 billion industry at the time, and I think video games were maybe about 4 or 5, maybe. I'd have to go back and look, but now there's no comparison. Like, I mean, mobile alone is like $70 billion a year industry, mobile, and that's the biggest one, right? Like you think it's like console just based on like how vocal everybody is about game consoles, but it's mobile by far. And again, this moment here, the Psycho Mantis fight. If you know, you know. Won't go into it, but if you know, you know. And then, again, the console had humble beginnings. Started off as an add-on for the SNES. And I don't know if you guys have ever read the book Console Wars. One second, let me pull it up just so you guys can see the cover. So, this book here, by Bleek Harris, Console Wars, it just tells the story of, early to mid 90s, the big two, Nintendo and Sega, were at war with their, NES, SNES, Sega Master, Sega Genesis consoles, and then it gives some brief insight as to Sony's relationship with both console makers, primarily handling the audio chips, and then certain team members on the Sony side, namely Ken Kutaragi, wanting to get a little bit more involved into um, the console business. It took a lot of convincing on their part to convince Sony Japan to do so. But after falling out with Nintendo, Nintendo decided to partner with Philips CDI on their console expansion or next generation system. We all know how that turned out. This was how the PlayStation first came into being. And after Sony got burnt from that relationship with Nintendo, they started out to do their own thing, and then the rest is fucking history. And that led into the PlayStation 2, the best-selling DVD player of all time, also the best-selling console of all time, and this was an era like this. We'll never see anything like this ever again. Again, PlayStation was pushing like on the experimental game side. A lot of interesting games concepts were coming out of a lot of places. The Matrix DVD was the first DVD I purchased. March 4th, 2000. October 26th. I didn't get mine until I think maybe a couple months after it released, just because it was just so hard to find, and I didn't have the money. But once I got the money, like it was a wrap. Like I literally like searched everywhere for like 2 weeks before I actually got my hands on it. At the Wiz in the Bronx, I think at Bay Plaza. Actually, yeah, it was the Wiz in the Bronx at Bay Plaza. Scooped it up, just randomly asked the dude like, "Do you have any in stock?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got like 2." I was like, "All right, let me get it." And I bought it that, and probably like every launch game they had out at the time, and it was great. I mean, I just remember getting it home, unboxing it, taking it over to my friend's house because I was like one of the first ones to get it, and just like again, hours and hours and hours of play. And this number was just announced like recently. They just said like they just made 160, and everybody was like, "What? Like, where is this stuff still selling?" Like, I'd love to hear the backstory as to like how they got the 160 in 2024. Like, that's wild. Again, I remember all this, and again, I haven't gone through this whole entire website, but this is bringing back like a lot of nostalgia. Again, like reading EGM, Game Pro, obsessing over every spec, every detail of this thing before it was released. The Emotion Engine, I remember they gave like their technology weird names. That was the MO back in the day. Again, revolutionary Blu-ray player. No, I'm sorry, Blu-ray DVD player. This is the one that started all. Coincidentally, it was the cheapest DVD player at the time. I think DVD players were like upwards of $500 plus. And then this one came out at $399. DVD. I don't know. I got a habit of doing that. DVD technology. It's been a while since I had to say DVD. Like that's a crazy concept in and of itself. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy times, crazy times. Let's see here. And of course, there were variations after. Once the console had gotten successful, there various refreshes of the original. I started to notice like they started taking away stuff like iLink. They were trying to have this thing like pretty much like replace like a personal computer. At least that's how it was announced. When that's one of the feature sets that were announced when this whole thing got announced. And a lot of stuff just never came to fruition. Like, people didn't use it as that. Like, nobody wanted to use a PlayStation as a computer. One, they didn't support it. They didn't provide the support for it, right? Like, where was that? Probably, there may be probably was some like testing within Japan, but nowhere else. And this was also during the era where everybody was like probably getting their first personal computers in the house, and they were just way better solutions. Like Windows, like you're not beating Windows. Like come on, like what are you doing? So a lot of this stuff started going away in subsequent refreshes, and we started getting these, you know, distilled versions of the console. Did have a network adapter. Did have like online, um, 2001, especially after the original Xbox was released, and it had Ethernet built in. So Sony had to do something to catch up. So they released a network adapter. I think I got mine with Final Fantasy 11. Yeah. Pre-ordered this thing. I think I still have the discs. I don't have the. Actually, I do have a PlayStation 2 with a network adapter attached to it, but no hard drive. Um, did have was it a 40 gig hard? I forget how big the hard drive was. I think it was 40 gigs. But it was. I just remember it being like this was like I think like $100, something like that. And by the time America got it, like the Japanese and everyone else was like so far advanced. Like I just remember turning on, running into like dudes that were like level 100. I got killed like right outside. I think like the first mission or something like that, and nobody would help me. So I didn't get far in that one. But it was just like it just wasn't supported. Like it just seemed like an afterthought. And Sony's online presence felt like that for a very long time, well into the PlayStation 3, and really didn't get on and popping until probably PlayStation 4, especially after the series of setbacks they had on PlayStation 3 with their online endeavors. Like that wasn't a strong suit. Oh yeah, and also was backwards compatible with PlayStation 1, so that was like cool because I didn't have to I could just disconnect all the stuff from the old console, put the new console right in my TV stand, and then go from there. Didn't have to do much as far as like disconnecting and connecting, even though I travel with this thing everywhere. Again, series of unrivaled titles, foundational IP. It was just it was a great time. Great time. Subsequent to that, you got the PSP launch. This I got launch day. I remember me and my friend Angelo going to King's Plaza in Brooklyn to pick up the pre-order I had. It was like midday. Went over there, grabbed it up, went to his house to chill, and played PSP pretty much all day. Played on a train. Cass was getting punched in the face with us on the train. I think I bought a couple movies too, so I was doing that with this Universal Media Disc. This was before the era of online storefronts and digital games. So this is how you would get your games on the PlayStation Portable. And this was again like this was a sexy piece of tech, right? Like it was just like console level gameplay in a portable format. I think it would have done better if it had dual analogs. It had like the one analog nub and this directional, and then it tried to do other substitutions, but it just didn't work. Especially like for games of that era, it needed another analog stick. But one of the first devices that had like built-in Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi was something that was just like new at the time. Not everybody had Wi-Fi this time, I'll tell you that much. I just remember going over to a lot of people's houses around this time, and I'm like, they didn't even have routers. It was just like, what? Foreign concept, but here we are, 2024, Wi-Fi's on everything. Yeah, I just remember it was like infrastructure. If you had, Wi-Fi, and then ad hoc, which was like device to device, peer to peer. But again, like it was just like one of those things where they just didn't know what to call it. So ad hoc was one of the modes for interconnectivity between devices. I did have Vice City Stories. I did have Chinatown Wars. I think I had Peace Walker. I just don't remember. I didn't have Peace Walker. It was just like at the time, I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it. PlayStation 3. Even though this is probably my least favorite console, it's the one that I'm most fond of, just because of all the all the struggle I went through with this goddamn thing, especially after dropping like $500. Was it 500? Yeah, I think it was 500. Might have been more. I think it was 500 plus games. I think everything came out to like, I think I spent like $1,000 that day. I got it launch day. I was at the Sony building. I waited online 21 hours to get it. And I tell you, I probably could have just gotten up that day and got one. What I should have done, instead of keeping it, there was, again, like, this was like early scalping. This was before StockX, before bots. I'm online, and this dude and this lady were just walking up the line, just trying to secure consoles. So they were like paying people upwards of $1,000. They were paying people like $1,000, $2,000, either for their spot in line, or to purchase the console like right after it was launched, later on that night. And I'm listening to her, I'm looking her in the face, and I'm like, nah, I want the console. And some people took them up on their offer. That was a smart thing to do, because it was a very long time before this thing to this day, it still doesn't justify the cost at launch, because there was just no games. There was no support. It was like a desert for like mad long. I don't think it got on and popping until like after like Uncharted, the original Uncharted released. But what a time. The first Blu-ray player, and you saw a theme with Sony during this time period where it was just like they just kept trying to like flip the success of prior products using like similar strategies. PlayStation, the original PlayStation was CDs. The next one was DVDs. This one was Blu-ray, and it just seemed like they just kept trying to like corner the not just the game market, but also like the consumer electronic market at the same time, as far as like how people got content. And it was a changing world, right? Like during this time, we got streaming services. We started getting digital storefronts by way of Steam, the App Store. When the iPhone was announced the following year in 2007, technology was moving past like an analog hardware-based solution for everything. And Sony, to their credit and also to their detriment, excuse me, was very hardware solution focused. They weren't very strong on the software side, and during this console, like, that reflected. Like, I remember in 2011, they got hacked. Everybody got hacked who had a PlayStation Network account. I was part of that whole situation. I think my dad got everybody's dad got compromised. So, and then it was also the first console to get over-the-air updates. I mean, the first Sony console. Microsoft had already done that with the 360, which released 2 years prior, well, a year prior, in 2005. So the whole idea of a digital storefront with Xbox Live Arcade, party chat, online friends list. Again, 360 killed this era. Like, they clearly won as far as like hearts and minds. Sony eventually caught up and surpassed them, but it was like very late in the game. Like, everybody was kind of ready to move on. And they did recover when they started releasing like a series of bangers. Like, again, 87 million of these things sold over the course of its lifespan. It took a while to get there, but they got there. Cross Media Bar, which was a holdover from PSP, still, a variation of it active in the console to this day. 3D TVs were a big thing at this time. They were pushing it in theaters. They were just trying to figure out ways to like get people to like buy the next thing, and 3D TVs was supposed to be that thing. I actually have a 3D TV still. with the glasses. I have the PlayStation 3D TV. Had copped it on sale as it was on its way out at GameStop for like super cheap. I should have like loaded up on them. I don't know. It's always one of those things where it's like in hindsight, it never happens when you're thinking about doing it. But yeah, I mean, it was just like a wild time. Like they were pushing 3D technology on everything. It just like everybody was like, "Come on, like what are we doing here? Like this is no one wants this. Like stop." It added extra costs onto the televisions. You had to keep these things charged all the time. It was just an unnecessary layer of technology. And also, this was the HDMI, HD era when televisions started getting flatter. Higher resolution, 1080p was the standard at the time, even though most content didn't go up that high. And then again, so many variations of the console. Blu-ray being front and center with this one. And yeah, what a time. Point of something to point out at the announcement of this console, there was a controller that they had showed on stage, which me and my friends affectionately refer to as Dildonics because the shit looked wild. Let me see here, PS3 launch announcement. 3V controller. What is it doing? So again, it was crazy. This thing. And this is an IGN story, just to give them the credit. Chris Roper. I mean, look at this thing. Why can't I see it? Look at this horrifying thing. Like, it was just bad. Like, nobody liked it. Like, again, I'd love to have been able to sit into the R&D session where the engineers were like, all right, let's do this thing. Like, no. It was bad. And they subsequently scrapped it and came out with, where's the other one? Subsequently came out with this thing here, the 6-axis, which was essentially a DualShock controller with no rumble. And then at the time, they were in litigation with the guys who owned the patent for rumble vibration-based technology, and they didn't want to pay whatever royalties or license fee that they had to license the technology. They had lost a court case, and someone at Sony just decided, fuck it, don't put it in there. Let's just release this. We'll rebrand it to 6-axis because it had like these gyroscopes in it where you can turn the controller and it, did certain movements and functionality, but no rumble. And then they touted it as like a rumble being a last gen feature. It was just like famous last words. And everybody was like scratching their head like, what? Like last gen feature? Like, meanwhile, over on Microsoft, they had it, it just added to the immersion. It was just something that was just missing from the console from the beginning. So I'm pretty sure I got one of these somewhere. But then they released the DualShock 3 and things kind of got back to, normal, quote unquote. But it was just like a misstep, right? It was just like one more misstep from the people who were managing the console at the time. I mean, the launch was a shit show, right? And I think this is the one that took Ken Kutaragi down because shortly after this was released, he retired. And other folks were working on the next gen console, and it's evident just the shift in tone with PS4 as opposed to PS3. Like, PS4 was like back to basics and brass tacks, as opposed to like this vision of the future where these engineers were going to tell you how you were going to use the product, as opposed to like releasing something, seeing how you use it, iterate on it, and like testing to see what worked. Right? It was just like, you're gonna play Blu-rays, you're gonna use, this is gonna be the multimedia focus of your entire living room, and you're gonna do everything on it, and it's gonna compete with PCs. I don't know what the accession was at the time, because it did come with like a Linux boot mode where you could upload a version of Linux to this. They later patched it and took it out. Had to pay a bunch of people to in a class action because they removed the feature. But it's just like one of those things where it's just like, what are these guys doing over there? You know, I don't think they know. And you know, this was also some of their first forays into online. And then Nintendo was doing its own thing with the Wii, so PlayStation, of course, had to do also ran to varying degrees. Well, I don't think it was successful at all. And it's funny. It's funny because this thing, I guess they must have had like a warehouse full of these things that they couldn't sell. So when PlayStation, we'll talk about it later, the PlayStation 4, the PS Vita, not the PS Vita, the PSVR was announced on PlayStation 4, and they cobbled together a kit using these from the PS3 era, and it was just like, this is clearly a cost-saving calculation, and this didn't have to be. And in order for them to, I guess, clear a warehouse full of these things, they just decided to pack it in with the PSVR, which was, I think, a terrible fucking decision. But again, I'm not the CEO over there. I don't know. Uncharted, this was like, when this came out the following year, it was like an oasis in the desert of PlayStation games that were released at the time. It was just like man, played like a B action movie that you would see on like Cinemax or something like that, HBO, late Saturday. But it was comforting. I mean, one can argue Nathan Drake is a mass murderer, being that you plugged so many heads full of lead in his first adventure. But you know, it's a video game. What are you gonna do? Resistance Fallen Man was like their Halo competitor, I think. Even though I think it was more Killzone than Resistance, but it was supposed to be Sony's like, we can do first-person shooters too, type game at launch. I think most people are fond of it because it's what we had. But I mean, at this point, like, Xbox kind of sealed the deal with everything that they were doing with first Halo 2 being backwards compatible, so you weren't touching that, especially with the multiplayer. Like, there was nothing on PlayStation to compete with this from a multiplayer standpoint, and from a game, like a story campaign gameplay perspective, like, they just didn't hit the same. But super ambitious and fond of it because it was like one of the first games on the system. MotorStorm was supposed to be this like visually stimulating technical feat, showing all these like crash. It was okay when it finally came out. Again, a lot of these games were super hyped in their marketing, but you know, I don't think this one hit the same as how it was portrayed. Also got the start of Assassin's Creed, which I never got into. I'm still not an Assassin's Creed fan like that. Just don't know. I don't know. It never appealed to me. Little Big Planet did appeal to me because it was like a platform. It was like Mario Maker before Mario Maker, I think. I don't know what year Mario Maker came out. I gotta double check. But it was just like this refreshing game with this cutesy character. It was like, all right, maybe platformers are back. They got a mascot over there. But the concept was super cool, right? Like, you had these characters, you built these levels, and you played them. And I like Sackboy. Pause. Infamous. This game right here, again, it was just like another one of those games that, you know, was refreshing to see, because there was, at least from Sony, you know, the third party offerings were the same over on Xbox, so you know, you didn't miss out in that respect. But like first party offerings, Um, like this was super cool, right? Like you had superpowers, you ran around this open world. Um, Super dope. Um, uh, I mean, again, Last of Us was like the swan song for this console, and I think this one helped it get over, um, help it overtake the Xbox 360. Um, Folks who I guess jumped in late, um, and this was like before the next gen consoles were. This 2013, yeah. So this is when the following generation consoles were released, and I mean this game like cinematically, story wise, character development, all that kind of good stuff. It was just gameplay was there. It was just like a perfect storm for PlayStation, and a testament to what they can do when everything is clicking. Grand Theft Auto, I don't think I need to say anything about that. It's 2025. We are ready for Grand Theft Auto 6. But I got this game on Xbox initially, and I mean, again, it's like some of the most fun I've had in games for a long time. And Grand Theft Auto is my game. Like next to Halo, Grand Theft Auto is my favorite game, and it's my favorite game series, and super close, right? Like Grand Theft Auto was just, I mean, again, like every game is like damn near perfect, you know, multiplayer bugs in the beginning side. It's just one of those games, man. You and then also, broadband started coming online. Netflix, remember Netflix Party Mode? I thought that was a dope feature. PlayStation Network, I've been on there since the beginning, and I just remember when first turning it on, when I got it home, and going into the store, there were like 2 downloads for like 2 launch games. I know one was for Resistance Fall of Man, but I forget what the other one was for. But that was about it. There was nothing going on there, and then slowly but surely it started building itself out. So it was the network, and then the store came. And look at the gap. Like you had PlayStation Network, and it took them 2 years to get their shit together to get a store up and running. That was a long 2 years. That was a long fucking 2 years. It also introduced their paid service, PlayStation Plus. Again, 2 years after that, after they said they weren't going to charge for online and multiplayer, they wound up doing it. And then PlayStation Home, which was like, I don't know how many of you guys know what Second Life is, but it was basically like a virtual world that you had a character and you lived in there, and you had a house and you had clothes, and you had hangout spaces. Like it was of an era, but it never took off. And those of us who would like check in periodically to see what was going on, run around. They slowly started adding features to it and changed some stuff around, but it just never became the thing that they wanted it to be. This probably would have been great during the NFT Gold Rush era, which I think that's kind of dead too now. But it was just one of those things where it's like should have worked, but it didn't work. And then we have the PlayStation Vita, which is the successor to the PSP. Again, same kind of formula. This time you had the 2 dual sticks, the dual analog sticks, but console level gameplay on a portable console. And it even streamed some PlayStation games from PlayStation 4. You could play. It was like remote play, right? There you go. Boom, 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 boom. But again, it was just like we're just going through the motions of doing stuff. The Nintendo DS kind of had the handheld game on Smash at this point, and it was just, again, Sony's also ran separate games, different price point, and a lot of them were good, but it was just, again, it's just like too late. It's too late. And then they released this thing, PS4. And this was, if you were a Sony fan, not an Xbox fan, because it was a terrible time if you were an Xbox fan. This was a time to be alive, because they recentered themselves around, what a console is. And you can tell, like, there were some very deliberate decisions made as to the way the console looked, the way it played, its OS, the power that it had. Although the PlayStation 3 had, on paper, a very powerful chipset, it was very difficult to make games for. A lot of developers, hated it. And this was a brute force attempt to claw developers back into their good graces. And that was with a whopping, excuse me, 8 gigabytes of, I think, like, GDDR4 RAM, something like that. I don't know, something crazy. I just remember people just, like, gasping at how much RAM they had. And it was unified. It wasn't, like, partitioned off as to, like, how the Microsoft method was, where it created, like, these bottlenecks for development. It was just very, like, throw stuff at it, it's going to handle it. Not only that, it didn't have, even though, from my understanding, behind the scenes, there was a camera pack in, but once Sony saw the reaction to the Kinect on the Xbox side, they just decided, like, nah, we're not doing that. They got a pack in that you got to pay for, and the console's more expensive. We're going to take it out, keep the price point simple. Because, again, on the PlayStation 4 controller, it had that light, and everybody was like, well, what the fuck is a light bar for? Is it just decoration? And I don't know if they ever directly answered the question, but industry insiders kind of were like, yeah, it was supposed to be PlayStation's Kinect, packed in. But once they saw how gamers reacted to Microsoft's TV situation in the Kinect, and the DRM situation, and having to always be on and doing a online check to make sure you paid for the games, like, it was just bad marketing, bad messaging, and Sony capitalized, so everything was kind of like going in their favor. And then we got some really great franchises from that, particularly No Man's Sky, Ghosts, and Horizon. Those are my favorite. But it was just like back to basics. It felt like PlayStation 1 again. PlayStation 1 Sony, where they were in charge, market leaders, dictated the terms. They had the hardware, they had the marketing, they had the games, right? And it's evident by how many they sold. Like, look at that shit. Like, that's crazy. Yeah, there you go. GDDR5. And then, of course, like, this being the age of social media, the share feature, very big. A lot of people made a lot of money and got their start using that feature, as far as, like, being, like, influencers or internet personalities. Different variations of the consoles. And this was the 20th anniversary PlayStation 4, which, again, I was in the middle of the ocean trying to pre-order this thing, and I did not have enough bandwidth on the internet and lost out on this one. Kind of fucking pissed about that. But what are you gonna do? The controller, again, like an advance forward. I mean, again, like, I don't know how many people really use this little touch bar thing, and it's still kind of in the PlayStation, the next PlayStation, but the controller just everything felt right about this. Everything just felt right. I didn't get it day one. I think I got it around the time Infamous Second Son came out. Because that one kind of demonstrated, like, the power of the PlayStation at the time. So I felt it appropriate to get it then. And rest is history, I mean, I think this is, next to the PlayStation 2, this was like the greatest rebirth of the PlayStation brand. Again, never underestimate the PlayStation brand. Super strong. But PlayStation 3 did a lot of damage. They were able to recoup at the end, and then it was Microsoft's game to fumble after the prior generation, and they fucked it up. Here you go, Infamous Second Son. Yeah, there you go. Bloodborne, never finished it. Just wasn't into the Souls games at the time, but I've gotten over my issues with it, and it's been great. Uncharted, I mean, come on, like, hey. And then Horizon Zero Dawn. When I first saw this game, I'm like, what is this? Like, why are they mechanical dinosaurs? Like, I don't understand it. Like, this makes no sense to me. But when I played it and uncovered the story, everything made sense, and it's like one of the greatest games I've ever played. Uh, Especially like story wise, right? Character development. Super cool, super cool. Post apocalyptic, which is the theme I'm kind of getting tired of, but super cool. And then we got like our first good Spider-Man game in a very long time. Like this is a masterpiece. I mean, Spider-Man's a great character in general, but just being able to web swing around New York City in high resolution, playing the web slinger, doing everything that he does, either in the comics or the movies, super great. God of War, of course, challenging, but one of the greatest games ever made. And then Ghosts, visually stunning, great gameplay, great story. I mean, if you haven't played it, like you need to change that ASAP. Last of Us, and again, I gotta admit, I've never played a Last of Us game. Watched them though. Just again, like the whole zombies thing just doesn't appeal to me, and I kind of like saw that it was a trend, and I, like once I see like something I don't like, I'm just like, all right, I'm just not gonna focus on it. But I do like to understand. I like to have a frame of reference to like why something is popular. So watch the YouTuber, play through the game, and story is excellent. Great game. And then of course, I think this is like the underrated story of the last gen, because I remember when Fortnite was first announced by Cliff Bleszinski of Gears of War fame, and completely different game. It was supposed to be like this. I don't know if you call it like a tower defense game where you had these characters, and I guess they had like different skill sets, but you had to like work together to build like a fort, and then you had a certain time to build the fort, and then some zombies would show up, and then you have to defend the fort. But there was this other game called PUBG that had this interesting battle royale playstyle, gameplay, and then all of a sudden, Fortnite had this similar battle royale style. Fortnite popularized it, but PUBG was the OG, and I think this is probably one of the most successful games in history, next to Grand Theft Auto, if not bigger than Grand Theft Auto. I mean, you had a generation of kids raised on this game, and they're still playing now. But got started within this generation. Still going, and can't wait to see what they have in store for the next iteration of PlayStation console, PlayStation 6. But we'll find out soon enough. And the Pro, right? It was just like everything the PlayStation 4 was good at. This made it like 1,000 times better. Like I just remember like the graphical upgrades for Grand Theft Auto, because that was like one of the first games. I don't know if it came later, but from all the games that I was playing on PlayStation 4, when I finally got the Pro, like it just made everything that much better. A little cute 4.1 teraflops, yeah, that was a good one. But then we also got this monstrosity. I mean, it was ambitious. And I have to say, like with a lot of Sony products, like I'm always finding myself at events that like demo the technology, or their newest product. At least when they're held in New York. Haven't traveled for any, but as long as I can, like I don't know, I was on PlayStation Underground, and I signed up for some stuff, and they send me invites to go take a look at some of this technology. But I think this one was like down at Sony headquarters on 23rd Street, and there was that screen door effect that just kind of like killed it. But it was super ambitious, just like Sony always is. But it just needed more power, and this was like VR kind of in its infancy, even though VR technology has been out for a very long time. But as far as like mass consumer produced versions of it, like this was a good start. Just the technology, the concept is ahead of the technology. Yeah. And I'm gonna skip PSVR because not really the focal point, and we're almost at an hour talking about PlayStation now. Going into the PlayStation 5, which is where we are now. Don't think I need to say much. You know, like again, it's just like they have sort of a perfect storm, kinda. Even though this was like a COVID release console, so you know, the console and its games are affected by that period of time. So there was scarcity, and getting a console. Game development has definitely changed since then. A lot of studios have who had hired people during that COVID era to make games for this console. Everybody's pretty much downsized their teams now. Games are super expensive to make, and I think we're kind of at a crossroads as to figure out like what does console gaming look like over the next 5 to 10 years. Is it even a thing? Like, do we need to spend another potentially $400 to $700 on a discrete device that just plays games, when all this stuff is going over the PC, and you can probably play that stuff over there? Yeah, I mean, well, it's good to have new tech and all this new stuff. You just gotta ask yourself the question, like, what's going on in the background while people are thinking about the next thing. And of course, we just got PlayStation Pro, which is basically like a PlayStation 5 with a bigger GPU. But in my opinion, and I think there are others that would agree, the original PlayStation 5 really hasn't done anything to, like, they haven't really pushed the power of this thing to justify like having to upgrade to a new console like that. That don't make no sense. So yeah, that's the PlayStation timeline. Yeah, so and of course the 30th anniversary, which not a whole lot of regular people got. I think it's some bots and influencers that got it sent by Sony. So Sony, if you're listening, if you want to slide one my way, like that'd be super great. And that begs the question as to like what's next. So we're definitely not getting a PlayStation 6 this year. But there has been a lot of talk about what those consoles will look like. We can assume AMD is doing a chipset in order to maintain backwards compatibility. I assume the same for Xbox. Will it be a digital only situation? Because again, like nobody's really doing Blu-rays, and I guess that's why they sold this thing as like a separate, the Blu-ray player as a separate add-on, so you have the option. The Pro is interesting that they're leading digital first, as opposed to having it as a pack-in. And again, $700. I don't know if the cost is justified. Especially so close to the next console's release. Um, so yeah, that's Sony in a nutshell. Um, Switching gears a little bit to everything Xbox. Of course, there's like next generation console talk at this point. Uh, Actually, let me go back to PlayStation 6 for a second. Just going over this article from, what is this website? Tech Radar. Okay, got it. Tech Radar Gaming. Rob Dwyer wrote this article just summing up like everything that we know. Again, anticipating it to be expensive. Could launch sometime 2027, 2028. I think 2028 is a little bit more likely unless they're trying to undercut what Xbox is offering, whatever that is. I mean, it's going to be called PlayStation 6. Like, I think they have like patents for the next console up until like 13, 14. So you can get used to that naming convention. And yeah, I think that's all we really know. There have been reports that they've been showing dev kits off behind the scenes, particularly at Tokyo Game Show. People under NDA can't really talk about it, but of course, like, it's all going to be impressive, right? It's all tech demos and stuff like that. We're not going to see anything real for a very long time, and since there's no E3 anymore, then we have to just kind of wait until Sony tells us what's it going to be. What would be interesting to know is the cost, how powerful, how much memory, the form factor. Me personally, I'm not a fan of the current PlayStation design, as I've said before. I think it needs to go back to a box and not some weird, whatever you want to call it. And the games, like, where are the games? I kind of don't want to see PS4, PS5, PS6 versions of games that I already have. And then either, out of the kindness of developers' hearts, having to upgrade the same game but not getting any new content, or having to pay like $10, $20 to step up to the latest version of X game, which I think is stupid, but anything to make a buck. Right? Again, switching over to the Xbox side of things really quickly, if I can. Xbox is currently on this marketing campaign of everything is an Xbox. Everything is an Xbox. You can play on your phone. You can play on your television. You can play on the Xbox console if you want. You can play on PC. And it's kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Couple that with declining hardware sales, Xbox releasing games on not just PC, but there's a lot of discussion about stuff coming over to PlayStation, which I think some games have already gone over. And then, subsequent games and franchises being released on competitors' consoles on a case-by-case basis. That Microsoft is going full third party. They're going to abandon, the hardware market and just become a publisher, which, again, that was always a possibility. Hardware is a loss leader, and you're supposed to make the money back on the hardware sales. But if I'm the biggest publisher, or one of the biggest publishers, I can just make all my money. You make the hardware. You make all the hard decisions. You have to sell the box. And all I got to do is just pump out the software and just keep raking the dough that way, right? And they control some really significant franchises to make that possible. It's definitely very reminiscent of the Sega era, when they had to exit the hardware market because too many missteps, too much wasted money. They just didn't have the dough. They ran out of cash, right? This is a different situation entirely because Microsoft is one of the um, uh, most valuable companies on the planet. I think they're in the $2 to $3 trillion market cap at this point. So again, like, although the Xbox division is a loss leader, um, if the company wanted to continue this initiative to push into people's living rooms, which they have been focused on for quite some time, it's probably going on 3 decades now, and they're in. But again, the PlayStation brand is super strong, and I think after the last console era, 8th gen console era, people have kind of picked a corner and they're not leaving, right? Like, nobody who's on PlayStation right now is really thinking about jumping to Xbox unless there was like some significant price advantage for the hardware. But if I can play Game Pass on a PlayStation or a Nintendo Switch, don't gotta buy the console. I can probably subscribe to the service for however long I want to subscribe for and play those same games, right? This year, Game Pass got Call of Duty day one and no additional cost if you were a Game Pass member. Like, Call of Duty is like the biggest franchise right now for like regular, average, everyday gamers, right? I'm not talking about your hardcore playing some obscure RPG. I'm talking about like regular people who game 20, 30 minutes, might be longer, but they play like the same game every year, right? It's just like before, like some people bought a Madden machine, like this is like the Call of Duty machine, and maybe you pay extra for skins or like the default edition, and you pay like a little stepped up cost there. But I mean, having a game this big at no additional cost, just simply for having a service that you pay for monthly, I mean, that's a hell of an incentive. But all companies have to figure out how to have a positive balance sheet, and the hardware is definitely a drag on their balance sheet. So they have to figure out what does their next gen console look like, right? And I've been hearing rumors up and down the spectrum where it's like they're gonna come out with a box, but they're also gonna do X, Y, Z, ABC. They may go the Switch route and produce a handheld, or the Steam Deck route, produce a handheld, and that's that, or a combination of the two, or even enlisting third-party manufacturers to produce a box at varying levels of cost and customization, and that'll be the Xbox of the future, right? It's just like completely decentralized from the Microsoft mothership. They're pumping out the software, they're securing third-party stuff, but hardware, they lean into a little less. So maybe there are a couple boxes directly from Microsoft for some time, and then they phase that out, or they have like third-party manufacturers making the box for them. Samsung is was suggested as like a potential partner for that, and they've been doing it with their televisions by having Game Pass being playable on the newer Samsung TVs. I think Amazon has done the same for some of their TV products, making Game Pass available, and playing over, I guess, the streaming service, playing games that way. I haven't tried it myself, but I'd be curious to know like what people's satisfaction is with playing games that way. I imagine lag. It's all dependent on your internet connection, but would be curious to know like how people found the experience. Like me personally, I wouldn't want them to completely get out of the hardware game. I like having a console, but I mean, the writing's on the wall. Like, technology is going a different direction. Kids have a different expectation of what technology is supposed to be and do. And if I already have an iPad that's as powerful as, like a previous gen console or a current gen console, why spend the extra dough when all I really need is maybe like an internet connection and some disk space or some hardware space, hard drive space, and do it like that, you know, and that makes me think about what Apple's doing. And I think I might have said this before in prior podcasts. Like, Apple is doing some like real like stealth moves with games. Like, I know they want to elevate their situation, as far as like Apple Arcade and having more people gravitate toward their offerings. Again, mobile is the biggest sector of gaming worldwide. Bigger than console, bigger than PC put together. All right, bigger than browser based gaming. So, with Microsoft's acquisition of the King portion of the Activision King Blizzard acquisition, I mean, Candy Crush, right? Like, if they can figure out a way to increase their offerings, Apple, I mean, then, you got kids for another generation. I think Apple kind of missed out in their war with Epic as far as like having that mobile push for similar type of games, right? Like, that's just a consequence of that disagreement they have between those two companies and who's supposed to pay for what, as far as like an online store. But conversation for another day. But the writing's on the wall. Like, consoles are kind of an outdated concept, right? It's a discrete device that does one specific thing, but it costs a lot of money, and it costs a lot to make games for it. So, gotta find a way to break that barrier where gaming is not this. I only do it in this space with this device on this screen, right? Plus, the services are getting expensive, so like, why wouldn't I want a little bit more utility if I can take my account, my games, and my saves on the road without having to lug around discrete hardware, or if it's just a matter of playing it on a certain screen, my phone, my iPad, my laptop, things that I can already travel with, like, that only adds value, right? Simple things like cross saves, right? Like, No Man's Sky just announced, well, they just released a beta for cross saves across platforms. So PC, Switch, well, I don't know if it's on Switch yet, but PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Like, all my saves are now in the cloud. So my save that I put in, like, I don't know, 200-300 hours on Xbox, I don't have to play it on Xbox now. I can play it on PlayStation and PC depending on where I am in the world. If I'm at a friend's house, I can sign into my account, get to my saves, and, whereas before it was like, oh, I have this on this version, I can only play this save. Kind of like how it is with Grand Theft Auto. Like, please, Rockstar, in the next one, have cross saves, because I'm pretty sure the reason why they've sold so many copies is because we all had to buy it on subsequent platforms as they were released, and it kind of makes you locked into whatever next subsequent generation console that you choose to play it on. Maybe PlayStation has the best version that runs right now, so I can't take my Xbox save, or I can, but I can only do it once. Then I would have to like start a new one on Xbox if I wanted to go back to play with my friends on Xbox. Like, it just creates this gate, this barrier for gaming for no real apparent reason other than so we can buy multiple copies, or we can't take advantage of some save glitch. I know they're really concerned with the integrity and security of their online games. Plus, they want you to buy those Game Shark cards, which I'm never gonna do. But maybe forced to with the next game console. But again, I don't know what Microsoft's doing. Everybody's trying to see what their next move is, and yeah, I think maybe for the next gen they'll have an offering. They'll release something, but 10 years from now, I think Xbox is going to be a completely different entity. I mean, I think they all are, right? Just because of the way things are going. So yeah, everything we know about their next gen console, probably 2028, will have some kind of advanced controller with new haptics, probably mirroring what Sony has done with the DualSense. And you can kind of bet money AMD is going to be involved. So if you haven't bought some shares of stock in AMD, you probably want to before the next announcement, because that's definitely going to bump it up. And moving on to Nintendo Switch 2, there have been leaks, rumors, all kinds of stuff coming out in the last couple of weeks about what their next gen console looks like, and from what I've seen, it kind of looks just like a white Switch. I think there was like a leaked video, promo video showing like some of the new features, but I don't know. Like in this day and age, you never know. It could be AI. But this is one of the leaked motherboards. NVIDIA returns to provide their chipset, and based on this article from Tom's Guide, written by Jason England, it's targeting like PS4 Pro style graphics. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Maybe we'll get some ray tracing out of there. I don't know. I think we expressed this before. I kind of want Nintendo to go back to a console configuration. I'm not really keen on the portable when I game, and it'd be interesting to see how 10, 20 years from now, what Nintendo is doing. I mean, they kind of have they have a very loyal following, and they do, again, to their credit, they skew more towards kids, towards families, and they're always like a go-to when it comes to getting kids into gaming, or just providing some like the Christmas gift around that time. But again, I only have one kid, so I don't know how it would work in a house with multiple kids. Do you buy everybody a Switch? Do you buy one Switch and that's the family Switch? But it'd be interesting to see if Nintendo opens themselves up via some revamped streaming service to allow for access to your content anywhere, maybe on your iPhone, your iPad, your laptop, your television, without a console. I don't know if they'll ever go that route. Like, Nintendo is very old school Japanese, and like, why am I allowing you to have access to my stuff if it's my stuff? Just wouldn't make sense for them, But it'd be interesting to see what they do in the next couple of years. It is 2025, which means this is the year of GTA 6. So, not slated to come out until later this year. Let me just navigate to the website. Not slated to come out till later this year, but I mean, Can't wait. Um, there were rumors that it was going to get delayed until 2026 or later, but Rockstar subsequently came out and said, "Nah, we're keeping the same timetable." And I think they said as much in subsequent earning calls, that they project to make X amount of dollars within X quarter. Um, it does fall in line with like maybe like an September October release date. Um, yeah, I think the whole entire world is waiting for this game. I mean, it's been like what? And when did the first one come out? I think it's been like 13, almost 14 years now at this point, since the last game was released. And I think we're all ready for the next campaign. No, it's been 10 years. Sorry, I added on extra years, almost 11 years. I think the first one was 2013. Yeah, so we've been playing the same game for pretty much 10 years. Like, young adults are now men. Men are now old. And the kids who were online playing and probably shouldn't have been playing, they're all teens now. I mean, can't wait for this game to come out. So I'm not sure what game you guys are looking forward to in 2025, but if you're looking forward to Grand Theft Auto 6, please let me know in the comments, like, what's your strategy for playing day one. Me personally, don't tell my bosses, I'm planning on taking some time off around the time that this game comes out, so I can give it some proper playtime. And also, topic of discussion, what do you think a next-gen console should look like? What are some of the feature sets that you wish they would include? What kind of games do you want to see? Do you want to see more graphics? Do you want to see more gameplay? Like, what would constitute a next-gen console in your mind? Let me know in the comments. So it's been a long one, this one. So I'm just gonna say, going into 25, want to have a goal of expanding the channel, being involved in a lot more online social engagement, and also being a little bit more consistent in the content. Sometimes I'm just like, if I don't have anything to say, I don't need to say anything, but that's not the way you grow a channel and an audience. So expect a little more push from me on the content side. Just trying to figure out what the workflow and the strategy looks like going into 25. But the first couple of episodes have been really fun. Been really therapeutic. Just trying to figure out like what people want. So any constructive feedback is appreciated. If you could subscribe across all platforms, it's Bleek, at Bleek on every major platform, including Twitch, YouTube, TikTok. So yeah, this has been the Zero Bandwidth Podcast, Episode 3. It is January 5th, 2025, and Happy New Year.